My name's Ben. I'm the graphics lead for XPlane. I'm one of XPlane's 3 full-time developers, and I've been working on XPlane for about 6 years now. Before I started working on XPlane, I was an XPlane user since a whole bunch of versions back. I discovered XPlane because I was looking for a flight simulator, and I tried it on my laptop, and the frame rate was great. And then I started making add-ons. I wanted to hook XPlane up to VATSIM. I tried making my own scenery. It came out terrible. I tried making an airplane. It couldn't fly. But I also worked on the plugin system and a little bit on the scenery engine. And eventually, after doing this for a couple of years, I reached a point where I was going back to school, and I talked to Austin about working for him part-time because I had some time, and that became full-time, and ever since I've been working on XPlane pretty much all the time.
Okay.
My background is computer nerd, so before XPlane, I actually worked on audio and video software, and then flight simulation was a bit of a change of pace for me. But I found I was really into aviation, and I was into flight simulation, and I found that by doing this full time, I could do the kind of coding for it that I wanted to do, which was to work on a next generation scenery engine and work on performance and see what I could do with the graphics.
Okay. Alright, so you kind of killed my next question, which was, why planes? Or why not, why not trains or automobiles? Or because you don't fly, Austin flies and
I've flown for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
I would love to get my license someday.
Yeah.
I actually went to ATC school for a year, which is part of the qualification process in the U.S.
Yeah.
And I did all of the ground school that you would do to get your IFR ticket, because that's part of the course. But at the time, I was working part-time, I was in school, and so I didn't have time to actually do the flight hours.
Yeah.
And I kind of wish I had, because that was in California, where you can fly any day, so it's a pretty nice place to get your commercial ticket. And then I moved to Washington, D.C., where you can't fly at all, because the entire area is restricted. So someday I do hope to actually go through and get my commercial ticket. But I've been interested in aviation for quite a few years, in air traffic control. And, when I sort of rediscovered that there's all this aviation simulation happening online, and that's how I got into it. I think we can get that into a patch, and I think it can be a patch that comes in the near term, because it's an incremental improvement. It's something we've known we had to do, but we've also had to do work on crashes and driver compatibility. Finally, XPlane 10 has been out for about 3 months now, and we're reaching a point where we've dealt with enough of the immediate problems that we can also start to look at third-party developers. And we just got the new world editor out about 2 weeks ago, and we got new scenery tools out 1 week ago, and so we can start to get tools into people's hands and update the documentation. And I get so many emails almost every day. Somebody says, I want to try this new thing in XPlane 10. How does it work? And I say, well, I'll try and get the documentation up as soon as possible. So things like removing limits where a texture size is too small, or getting documentation up for a new process. I think we're reaching a point where we're going to be able to do that pretty quickly and make some nice steady progress. Yep, the very first preview of World Editor 1.2 is out. It's very new, it's very raw, but I think we'll get it to a stable beta very shortly. And that's going to let people make air traffic control routes where they say where the planes go. Right now, if you have an airport and you haven't said where the planes go, we have an algorithm that I wrote that tries to figure out where the planes should go. But it's kind of dumb. It's just a computer. It doesn't know what we know about the airport. It just sees a big mass of concrete. And so sometimes the AI planes, they say, well, I'm going to get from here to there by going straight there, and they go through a building. So when we get these kind of tools, I think people will be able to really take advantage of some of the stuff the ATC system does. They'll be able to customize those layouts and really get nice AI motion. We use real physics in the ATC system. The AI planes, they taxi. And when we first announced this, people were really surprised. Why don't you use a fake flight model performance? But it turns out most of the cost of the flight model is figuring out which part of the airplane is hitting the ground. Well, even if you didn't use the flight model, you would still have to know where's the airplane hit the ground, because your model has to be on the ground no matter what.
Yeah.
So by using the real flight model, we get all these wonderful subtle oscillations.
Yeah.
If it's a bumpy airport and the airplane starts to roll, first you see it slowly gain momentum as it's going just a little bit uphill, and then if the airplane in front of it stops short, it hits the brakes, and there's that subtle bounce of the suspension system, and all of that is, and maybe the wings flex the tiniest bit, so we get this really high quality level of detail. And once people can start putting in these ATC taxi layouts, not only will it be detailed, but the airplanes will actually go where they're supposed to, which will, I think, help complete the illusion. Our list of things we want to do stretches out forever. Because as soon as you start working on flight simulation, whether you're working on the core engine or add-ons, what you immediately realize is just how much more detailed real life is than you'd ever think. So what I found is that, before I worked on XPlane, a road is a road and a cloud is a cloud. And then you write a computer program to simulate them and you go, oh no, that doesn't look anything like the real thing. And so you refine it and you refine it. But the more you refine, the more you realize just how much detail there actually is in real life. So it can make you crazy because you look around and go, oh, it's never going to look like that. But it also, at least for me, it's really helped me see the world differently because there's, I think from the, especially from the artists who are on our team, I picked up sort of an eye for looking for details and subtle plays of light and patterns in clouds and water that otherwise you might not notice. So the roadmap of what we want to do visually can just stretch out forever. Most of the technology that's new to XPlane 10 we've been working on for years. Some of it we even thought we might have an XPlane 9, but then it wasn't quite good enough, so we held off and we worked on it more. And now we have shadows. So there's always a pipeline, and we try and have at least some idea of where we're going to be going, so that we can make a series of graphics technologies that all make sense together, and can create an entire illusion that makes sense. So in XPlane 10, we've looked at a lot of shading technology that has helped our artists make airports and cities. That was two areas that we really pushed on hard, because in XPlane 9, the natural terrain looked pretty good and the cities were not up to par. So we've got a huge number of shading techniques to really help create a realistic city with a ton of detail without using too much VRAM, because a city's enormous, and if you use a lot of VRAM on a city scale, it's going to add up. And similarly with the airports, we have a lot of subtle effects we can bring in. So all those shading technologies, they kind of all make sense at once to let you finish a certain drawing aspect. And I think we'll be able to identify another set of graphic technologies, and then we have to make some decisions. Do we put this out in a patch, or do we wait for a new version? Because people always want more graphics and more quality, but at the same time, once you buy the product, you want to keep using it, and if you get an update and it runs at half the frame rate, I mean, that's not fair to people who already bought it. I mean, they may not be in a position to upgrade their computer. So we try to get the really heavy effects in early, and that establishes what the version will be, and then we can add more options for authors and better tools and performance enhancements. And then, at some point, after several years, we can go to another major version and add another effect that's really a game changer, and kind of resets the graphic standard. Yeah, I've been working with Javier Roland for years, and this is the first time I've met him in person. I've known about Torsten and XUIPC for years. Philip, I haven't met in person until now. Most people in the flight sim community, we all meet online first, and then finally we get together and we say, and then it's really nice to meet the person in person, and you can sit down and have a beer. So every couple of years you get an event like this where you really get a good critical mass. We had one a couple years ago in France, and just by luck, it seemed like everybody showed up at once, and a whole bunch of people got to meet each other who never would have crossed paths. So first of all, it's really nice to have an online community that every now and then can become a physical community, even if for just a weekend. It does take a lot of time, but we learn a lot from seeing what third parties are doing. What happens is we work on the engine and we say, oh, that's pretty good, and then you guys take the engine and you push it and you push it, and you don't know what we know, and so you just go as far as you can with your add-on.
Yeah.
And then you send us back the add-on and we go, oh my god, I can't believe they did this. But that gives us an idea for the next thing we have to do to increase the capacity. Okay. So anytime we create some kind of interface and then the third parties just go nuts with it, I think that's a good sign, because it means that we gave people a tool that was really useful. Yeah. So it's useful for us to see performance, to see what kinds of add-ons are useful. Yeah. In XPlane 9, we added the ability to turn up and down your lit texture based on a data ref. So this can be used, it turns out, for almost anything. You can use it to flash the strobes, to change the cockpit lights, to do flashing neon signs and scenery. When we added this feature, we didn't realize how important it was going to be. We thought it was kind of cool, but we just thought, well, here's this little thing we'll do. And then we saw that everybody used it, and they used it for ways that we couldn't possibly imagine. So sometimes it's nice to see the planes back and get a sense of what's going on. Yeah. The trickiest thing is that sometimes you'll get a well-made airplane, and 7 or 8 effects have been used at the same time, and the author's reporting a bug, and I have to go in and try to figure out what's happening, and so you have to peel back layer after layer, and eventually you get down to the one area where maybe there's a glitch. Yeah. But in a well-made art asset, all the effects combine together so that you can't see what happened. You just see what looks like real life, which for me as a programmer is very tricky. Yeah. So when our art team has a bug, I tell them, give me a purple texture, give me a blue texture, just let me see what's happening, because when they paint a texture really well, it almost becomes impossible to tell. Yeah, so I'm not an artist. I need debug. Yeah. I need bright colors and really obvious problems.
Okay, so you're not an artist, but you are the main or the programmer that works on the graphical engine.
For graphics,
so
yes.
So there is an interest in what artists do, because they have to work with whatever you build and whatever
absolutely.
You supply with.
But in the end, I trust their judgment about what looks good. If I put a feature in, I will trust Javier or Alex or Tom to make the final decision about how bright should this be, how wide should this effect be, because they'll dial it in really subtly and get it right on the nose. A couple things about really pushing texture resolution. First of all, one of the nice things about texture resolution is that you can turn it up and down in the simulator, and there's a huge range of hardware, and every year the very best machines become even bigger, and the very lousiest machines stay lousy. So every year the spread of hardware gets even more crazy. But the nice thing about textures is you guys make the very biggest, very best texture you possibly can, and if the user doesn't have the hardware, they can use the rendering setting to turn it down. No foul, the add-on is still going to work. So to me, it's a very scalable option, and when they've turned that texture resolution down, they're going to get the same performance as if you had simply made a light version of the plane. So that's a kind of detail that's very easy to cope with. There are some kinds of detail in XPlane that once you turn it on, you have it forever, and now if a user can't use it, you have a problem. So I'm always looking for any kind of detail that can be turned up or down. Like the Bezier curves for the roads and the taxiways, you can make them more chunky or you can make them more smooth, and it's up to the user, and that's something that gives us flexibility to look really awesome on a high-end machine, but hopefully still be able to fly on a machine that's not high-end.
Okay, and how does XPlane scale down, say, a 4096 map? I mean, without saying what setting you need to do, how does that work then?
So
is that through MIP mapping, or is that?
XPlane, like many 3D programs, uses MIP mapping, and it's running at all times. So when you view your airplane not up close, you're actually seeing the smaller texture, which is okay, because if your wing is only 100 pixels on screen, 128 by 128 is all the texture you could possibly see. If you put your texture in a DDS file, then the file already contains the MIP maps, and this actually presents an interesting opportunity for authors, because when we make a MIP map, if you give us a PNG and we need to make a MIP map, we do the dumbest thing possible. We downsize it by 2 by averaging again and again, and it looks okay. But if you make a DDS file, you get to decide what every image is. And Alex Gifford, who is the artist on our team who does the autogen and a a lot of the urban effects. He's crazy. He's a mad scientist. Yeah. And what he started doing was putting his textures in DDS, but changing the look of the texture with size. Yeah. So for example, he's got a lit map for the windows of skyscrapers. Now when you're up close, those windows are pretty big, and so you really just want to texture them honestly. But then normally what happens is you get far away, you get the map, and the windows lose their sharpness because you've got this downsize of the yellow window with the black of the building, and it looks like muck. Yeah. So what he did is he just went into Photoshop and he repainted the small size and he punched them up. He could put a filter on it and change the brightness. And the result is actually really nice. I think the result is first visible in the 10.04 betas. As you go away from the buildings, they maintain this sharpness that you just can't get if you don't control the bitmap yourself. Okay. So you do have control if you want to take the time to try and just get a little more out of the lower resolutions. It is possible. It's been great. I'm super jet lagged, but that's always the case with a flight sim trip. But it's really been great to meet everybody in person. Yeah. You know, we've been working with the Aerosoft team for a while, and Austin had met them, but this is my first time meeting them, and I've been talking especially to their 3D art team for a couple months now, and now I've seen them face to face, and I've seen them jump in the Mediterranean in the 15-degree water because it turns out they're all crazy. Yeah. So it's great to be able to actually see people in person and see what the add-ons are doing, and I'm hoping that as people see a bit of XPlane, they'll sort of get a sense that I could just jump into this because that's how I started out. I just as a user I would go through all the files and just look at them and say, oh my God, look at this airplane! It's got this texture, and that's where the windsock comes from, and. A lot of people, that's how they start, is they just start tinkering with it. Yeah. And, my hope is that XPlane 10, even though it's very powerful and we've tried to make it look as good as possible, I hope it's still a simulator that you can tinker with and that, people can just kind of play with and poke around with it and maybe make their own airport a little nicer or change some textures and just explore a little bit. Yeah. I guess if there's one thing, I think I'd like to say thanks to all the users who have worked so hard. I mean, we've worked our asses off, but it's really not just us. I mean, XPlane is built around a whole community, and we've got this inner ring, sort of this inner family of volunteers who do incredible things for the simulator. And then we've got third-party guys who make great add-ons, and we've got users who just take the time to help each other in forums and enthusiasts. And we have people who, when something goes wrong, they take the time to help us work through it. Some poor user, he's got a bad DVD drive, but he takes the time with us. We're trying to help him. He doesn't just get frustrated. He's willing to work with us. And so I feel like a lot of people all make a lot of effort to make a flight simulator possible. And so it's.
So what do you want to say to them?
It's a thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, I'm bye.
All right. Well, Ben, thanks.
Thanks
a lot for your time,
no
of
problem.
course.
You're very good with the camera.
You guys can edit it, and I'll say all sorts of things I never imagined. I'll say, XPlane will run at 4,096 FIPS.
I just got that on camera.
Oh, you don't even have to edit it. I'll hear it on the developer blog. You promised that it would be 4,000.